What you think about when you're born into a fire? Let them burn it out. Sell them to the richest buyer. They wanna let the world decay. They tell us lies and fade away, fade away. We feel betrayed. We were raised to lose.
What's up, Internet? I'm Aries Van Dam. Sorry for the late start today. My AC is out. So if you see me grabbing my phone and running off camera, it's the air conditioned man calling me back. But I must suffer for my work. I'm here in the heat, in New Orleans heat, with no AC, giving you guys a break from your Epstein overload. Because I've been watching a lot of content on that, and this is going to be a break from that. We're gonna break from it and just talk about a debate. But before we do, I need y'all to help me prove to my friends that I don't have to pretend to be a fake nice guy to get you people. Oh, nah, that's not it. That's a good one. So help me prove to my friends I don't have to pretend to be nice. I'm not nice. I'm a dickhead like most of y'all. That's just the way the world is. Sorry. But what's up, Nappy? I'm getting here early. I got a late start today. Let's get into it. Put this up here. So what we're looking at today is Andrew Wilson versus Gerald Morgan Jr. from Louder with Crowder. He's the CEO of Louder with Crowder. And they're going to do a debate on Zionism. So I haven't seen this one. I watched a clip of it, and I figured I'd check it out with you guys. So let's get into it.
The Jews. Well, now that we've got all of your attention, Israel is the third rail. I want to say new third rail, but I know it's not new. Israel has been the third rail for a very long time, and it kind of comes and goes. And it seems like right now, anything that you do talking about the Jews makes you one of these two polar opposites. Either you're a Nazi and you hate all Jews and they're responsible for everything, including the death of JFK and aliens, or you are a Zionist shill, and Israel can do nothing wrong, including killing 5-year-olds in Gaza right now. It doesn't really register on your radar, but there is a huge, huge piece of ground in the middle where a lot of good conversation can happen and where you can actually get at the truth, but not a lot of people are talking about it. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be. Historically, we've seen that when people run to extremes, it usually ends very poorly. Usually ends in violence, and I want to avoid that. I want to have conversations with people about Israel without having those slurs thrown at either one, and I want to actually find some truth. We need to be able to have honest, very straightforward conversations about these issues that involve Israel and plenty of other subjects, but Israel seems to be the flashpoint right now, and we just don't seem to have that ability. So that's what we're going to try to do today. Let me set it up really quickly with a couple of interviews that recently Tucker Carlson has performed. First was Mother Agapia, a Russian Orthodox nun, and if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. And the interview sparked a lot of controversy. We're not going to dive into everything that was said, but there was one topic in particular that I thought would be very helpful to address and to go into a little bit deeper. And kind of try to figure out what it really means, where the church has gone wrong in some ways, the Protestant church, and where in some ways maybe they've gotten it right. And that's Christian Zionism and what it really means, and if Christians even actually know what it means. So she kind of brought this term up in regard to end times eschatology, and I thought it'd be a really good jumping off point for us. So here, take a look at the interview with Tucker Carlson.
Their belief tells them that's okay. We want to have this third world war because we're going to be taken away. And we'll be okay. And we'll come back later after all the fighting's done. That's sort of basically what their theology tells them. And in the meantime, all the Jews are supposed to convert to their brand of Christianity or die in the conflagration.
And so I'm asking you this because you're a nun.
Right.
That's not a Christian,
It's not a Christian belief, no. Or precept. Yeah.
Any idea where that came from, that idea?
The rapture?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, originally the idea of having the 1,000-year kingdom is a heresy that was in the early church. But the real push of all that comes from the 1830s. James Darby, Schofield, or John Darby, Schofield. It's it's a new theology that has no basis in the foundations of Christianity. It has nothing to do with it.
So that might not be a point that really stuck out to you, but it was that stuck out to me. And don't worry, we do have a very special guest with us. We'll get to him in just 1 minute. He is waiting very patiently, and we will dive into that. But I also wanted to play another clip from Tucker Carlson because he's been getting a lot of flack as somebody who seems to be one-sided in his reporting. You can have any guest on you want. You can really conduct interviews, I guess, any way that you want. But a lot of people are starting to pick up on trends with Tucker and call him out. Sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not so much. This is one that he got a lot of flack for. And at the time, I thought this was actually a very, very fair exchange. This is when he was talking with Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz quoted Genesis 12:3 as his reason for supporting Israel. Watch.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, says the nation of Israel. Right. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on.
But he said not the nation.
We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel.
We are commanded to support Israel, and
what does that mean? Israel.
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on. Define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel. Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis. That's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel. Yes.
And does that?
He's talking about a nation that wasn't even invented. It didn't even come into existence until like the 1950s or something.
The current borders, the current leadership. He's talking about the political entity called Israel.
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yet nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
The political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
believe
Israel.
That's what God was talking about in Genesis.
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands.
He believes that it's in the Bible that we're supposed to give money to Israel so they can murder babies. He believes that's his God that says that that's the way that's supposed to go.
Of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Okay. Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is. So I don't know if we can...
I don't remember the scriptural citation.
So if I name my house Little Israel, I get money from the government.
That was rough.
Fucker.
Tucker seemed to have his questions well thought out, asked some very good questions. But look, is he right? Is Ted right? Do we need to support Israel, the modern state, as Christians? What is Israel and who makes it up? What is Christian Zionism? And is that the real reason that Christians support Israel in the first place? With me in just a second will be Andrew Wilson to discuss this and many, many more topics. But this brings us to our latest installment of Gerald Apologizes Apologetics.
Gerald Apologizes Apologetics.
It doesn't mean that.
It doesn't mean that, but whatever. Okay, it's fine. With me now, the man in darkness, shrouded in smoke, typically the Andrew Wilson. Hey, look, where can people, before we get started answering all of these questions, which I'm sure will draw zero controversy from the interwebs, where can people find you and support you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube on The Crucible. Pretty easy. Just type in The Crucible and you'll see my content pop right up. You can find me on Twitter at PaleoChristCon. You can find me over at Rumble, where I'm going to start doing the extravaganza again this next week, starting at, I believe, the 5 p.m. Eastern time slot.
Yeah.
So you can find me all over the place.
Fantastic. You just said something. You can search you on YouTube and your content will pop right up. Must be nice. Fantastic. I'm not sure who you're paying over there for that, but slide me a number. It'd be great if our content was like that. Okay, so you saw the two different clips, and they're two kind of different jumping off points, but I wanted to kind of expand upon a conversation that you and I have had in very kind of brief detail, right? You and I talk every once in a while when these issues come up. Maybe sometimes you'll chime into an X post that I make, or vice versa, and then we'll text or something like that. And what I have seen as a Protestant is that there is this really, I guess, bad theology that's floating around there about the state of Israel. And anytime I bring that up, anytime I try to have some clarification, I immediately get labeled a Nazi. Which is really funny because the day before I am a Zionist shill, which is really hard to do, but I take the hats off and get the checks wherever I can get them, I guess. And I just kept thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way to have these conversations. There's got to be a better way to try and figure out where the truth actually lies instead of all of this extreme rhetoric and all of the people just saying everything that Israel does is completely fine and everything that they do is absolutely horrible, and they're trying to completely subjugate every other government on the planet and everything else. And I'm just like, God, we're not getting anywhere with this. And I've just historically seen it not work out well. And one of the things I wanted to put to bed for Christians was what Christian Zionism actually is and what the Bible actually says about it. But you actually posed a really good starting place right before that. And that's kind of the crux of the whole issue, is that does Israel actually protect Jews, or having the modern state of Israel, or does that put them at more risk? And is that why people are mad? So what was your thinking with that, Andrew? And tell me what your opinions are.
Well, I did a debate with a pretty well-known Christian apologist. Now Christian apologist. He's converting over to Orthodoxy, I guess, at some point. Catechumen now. Where we did this debate on Christian Zionism and went through all of this. So the first thing to point out is the reason that you have so much trouble having this conversation at all is because of organizations like CUFI, which have their tendrils in everything, trying to make sure that all Protestant apologetics revolve around the Ted Cruz framing there. The Ted Cruz framing being that Christians have this kind of moral ought to support the modern state of Israel, when in fact we don't.
Gotcha.
Now,
so tell people the CUFI. Yeah. That's John Hagee, right? That's his organization that he leads.
Yeah. Yep. So, CUFI has more members, I believe, than Israel has people in it.
It's true. So it's true. I think it's over 10 million people.
Yeah, over 10 million. Yeah. And this sort of theology, there's lots of paychecks which are switching hands. You can find out a lot about CUFI. Anybody who wants resources on it, you can just DM me. We'll send it over. There's a whole lot of bad news going on with CUFI, but that's its own kind of rabbit hole to dive into.
Correct. Yeah.
And I would rather stay on the idea. I think where this begins is with eschatology. Now, Gerald and I kind of have a fundamental disagreement here. I guess before we dive into that, why do you think eschatology is not kind of the crux? Because now you got me curious.
I knew you were going to bring it back. So I think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding from the views that I have seen. So I, as a Christian, don't believe that what she said, is it Agapia? I don't want to mispronounce it, be insensitive. But
Agapia, I believe.
Agapia, okay. Yeah. That what she said was completely accurate. She was asked a question.
She's a nut, man. She'll forgive you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hit you with a
I
ruler.
don't know. I might say something where she's like, I'm not going to forgive you. That's, I'm not going to hold it. I'm not going to send, but I'm also not going to forgive you, or I'm going to do it in private, so you'll never know. No, what I'm saying is that she was asked a question about the harpazo, the rapture. And so I then heard her pivot to the millennial kingdom. And I was like, well, hold on. Those two things are not connected necessarily. They don't have to be connected. They're around the same time frame. They are eschatology, but you can believe in no rapture at all and still believe in the millennial kingdom, right? So I didn't understand why she pivoted. So one, I was like, well, that seems like a weird
she was asked a specific
answer.
Question about where this comes from, and she points out Darby.
Well, she went to Darby after she went to the millennial kingdom, and that being a heresy in the early church. And I know that was said a heresy in like the three somethings at one of the councils. And so I thought, like, okay, well, I understand where that come from, like dispensationalism, right? So you start to see Israel in a different light. But I thought, like, that's not necessarily why Christians support Israel, because a lot of times they point back to
I
Genesis
understand.
12:3, and it's completely disconnected from their eschatological views, right? But I understand
but
the
not
ties.
really. But not really. Let me walk you through it, at least from the logical basis.
Yeah.
This was the argument that I presented, primary argument against Christian Zionism. Would you agree with me that any
No, because if I do, I'm screwed. I have no idea what you're about to say.
Well, would you agree with me that any Messiah which is named by Israel to be a new Messiah is going to be in the spirit of Antichrist?
It would be Antichrist, yes.
It would be Antichrist.
Yeah.
Maybe not the Antichrist,
No,
but in the
but
spirit of Antichrist.
lowercase Antichrist, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And is going to have to denounce Jesus as being a false Messiah,
prophet, yeah.
which pits them immediately against all of Christendom. Yes?
For sure.
All of them,
Yeah.
all Protestants.
There is no debate.
Yeah. No debate there.
Yeah.
Even the Mormons, even the JWs, all of them, right? All of them are going to be like, okay.
Everybody would be pissed off universally. It's a
yes.
unifying thing.
Yes, everyone's going to be upset. That's going to be the spirit of Antichrist. So then why would a Christian Zionist who knows that and knows that the Temple Institute there and Kufi are moving towards naming Messiah? Can explain that to me?
So my critique, and I saw that, I don't see that in their documents. So the Temple Institute has a spokesperson in 2010 that did say that they are looking to do that, not as something that they have to do. So here's my understanding of it. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
Millions and millions of dollars.
They get millions of dollars, but not to name a Messiah. So that's where I disagree with you. I think the Jews are still looking for Messiah. That doesn't mean that they're looking to name him immediately. And here's my proof for that. They've had many people come forward over the years and say, I'm Messiah. They've not run open arms to him, including the guy that actually fulfilled all the prophecies. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that they're ready to do it.
So they're just moving towards the spirit of
temple.
Antichrist.
No, I think they're moving towards creating a temple. But see, I think this is where it starts to get a little muddy, because I agree with you that if they named Messiah, that would be a problem.
Yeah, but what's the purpose of building the temple, right?
It doesn't have anything to do with the Messiah. To them,
it does.
Not
it
to
does.
them.
What about us? What about Christians?
Christians, yes, but we already know who the Messiah is, and so that's their problem to deal with God. I don't care if they have a temple or not. They're still
within our theology.
saved.
This is a sign of what?
The temple?
The third temple being rebuilt. Yes. What is that a sign of?
It's really irrelevant to Christians, right? It doesn't affect how.
No. Okay.
Sup, crossover.
When you so I want you to look at this in totality.
Okay.
So, and why I think that this has to do with eschatology. See, I believe that Christian Zionists and all Christian Zionists are accelerationists. They're trying to accelerate their eschatology. They're trying to accelerate.
So they're trying to hasten the coming of.
Yes, they're trying to hasten.
The second.
The reason if you ask them, why is it that you want to move towards naming Antichrist? Why is it that you want to support people who are moving towards the naming of Antichrist? Now you can say, wait a second, Andrew, they're not naming one right now. So what? The entire religion and the entire state and all of the religious Jews are still moving that direction. They're not moving towards Christ, they're moving towards Antichrist. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, why would we support that? Well, what all Christian Zionists claim is that that's part of biblical prophecy for Christians. That stuff needs to come to pass in order for the events in Revelation to take place. And so what they're doing is they're trying to accelerate what you would consider Armageddon and the end times, right?
So I would disagree.
How is it not? So how is it not related to eschatology?
So I would disagree with. So first, let me split these things into just the two pieces. One is the accelerationists and those who are not. I grew up in this church and I've never heard that before in my life, ever, not one time. I know it exists though, so I'm not saying that it doesn't. But what I'm saying is, I don't know if they're, and maybe you might have some statistics on this, but who of the Christian Zionists, who would be accelerationists and who wouldn't be, right? Because for me, when I define Christian Zionism, and we can get down into that, I think I have a segment on that here in just a minute.
Well, what other reason could they give?
So it's not saying that. So I'll give you the reason that I would give in my current view of eschatology. The temple exists in my view of eschatology. The Jews rebuild the temple. There's a peace treaty with Israel. The Jews rebuild the temple. There's the abomination that causes desolation, and it is in the temple. Okay, I don't think it is my job or Christian's job, and the Bible doesn't give any indication that we are supposed to help hasten that at all. It just is.
Agreed.
That's the view of most people.
But then what's the purpose of supporting a land which is moved? So if the idea here is God's blessing Israel. This is what Ted Cruz is saying, right? God's blessing Israel and blessing the people who bless Israel. Right, but he's the spokesman.
Doesn't the Bible say you're supposed to shun heretics? Isn't it heretical to say that Jesus is drowning in a pool of his own excrement in hell right now? Wouldn't that be a heretical thing to think? Don't they all think that?
For a lot of people with this view,
Well,
God's blessing
yes.
you because you bless Israel. Okay, but why are we supporting Israel if they're moving towards Antichrist, meaning moving away from Christ instead of towards Christ? I don't understand. Why would we do that? What would Ted Cruz's response be? We as Christians are moving towards that, right? Because that's what God commands us to do, and that's going to lead to the events in Revelation. That's going to lead to these events as far as eschatology goes. But that's the only logical way it can go. What other reason would they have for doing it?
Well, no, they would think. I think Genesis 12:3. If you misinterpret Genesis 12:3 to think that you are supposed to bless the current nation state of Israel, including its government, which I think is very troubling, that people would think that necessarily. That in and of itself is enough. Like, you don't have to have any other cause to support Israel.
Why are you supposed?
Because God commanded you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Why did God command you to?
Doesn't matter. He just said it. Why does?
But I think it does matter.
Hold on, but does baptism save me? There are verses that make it seem like it does. There are verses that seem like it doesn't. You know what? I don't care. You know why? Because Jesus commanded me to do it. Therefore, I am going to. Same thing here. If they believe God is commanding me to bless Israel, I will bless them. It doesn't matter what that results in. It just matters that God told me to do it. I think 12:3 is enough, but I understand
that you can. So I'm trying to follow this logical step one, right? Premise one. God wants us to bless Israel from their view, right?
Yeah.
And Israel, according to Ted Cruz, is who? The modern nation state, modern government. He went ahead and acquiesced all those points. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So he's saying God wants us to bless this current nation right this second.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? I can only assume that
But he said it 2,000 years ago.
Blessings mean support, whatever they need.
I don't think he could answer that, by the way.
I don't think any of them can.
No,
right? But I think that we can kind of make some inferences here, which are rational. Blessing them probably doesn't mean like leaving them at the mercy of their enemies and things like that, right? Blessing
defending them against attack and stuff.
Yeah. I don't think it means giving them money so they can kill babies.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. That would be the inferences that I would make there, and I think most people would make there. So what you're really saying is that God doesn't just want us to bless them, but to defend them, right? To assist them, to do all of these various things, to move our power structure towards being in obedience and compliance with their power structure. That's what it essentially means by blessing them.
I wouldn't go that far. I don't know that they believe that fully, but I'm trying to figure it out because I don't think this is part of the problem. I don't think it's very well defined on their side. I don't think they could very well tell you, like, okay, well, I can come to you right now and tell you need to give money to the Temple Institute. They wouldn't be able to refute that.
But if Ted Cruz is sitting there saying we need to give a bunch of money to these guys, we need to assist them in any way possible, how is it? I mean, how is that idea of blessing not moving into compliance with the wills of Israel? Who gets to determine how they're blessed? Right? I think that it's going to be Israel who gets to be the determiner under Christian Zionism as to how they're blessed.
Maybe because the Bible does talk about what Christians' duty to bless, and we'll talk about Christian duties towards Israel here in just a minute. And I don't want to step on future topics in just a sec. But it does. Listen, I understand that line of thought. I think it is very rational, and I think it makes sense. But I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that's where people are right now. I don't think people are thinking like I have to align the power structure in the United States with Israel to be able to bless the people of Israel. I think most people would think, well, if I give money to the support of Israel, just to the general fund or something like that, or if we help them militarily, if they get attacked by other countries. And some people would even say the $3 billion a year is part of what we should do. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we should probably pull almost all of that, if not all of it back, and from all of their enemies that we're supporting as well. That'd be great. Keep that money home. But that's part of my problem is that these things to me are disconnected. They're not necessarily flowing into each other just because they support Israel because of genocide. Well, but I don't think we've made that case yet. I think.
Well, here, let me try to make a better case. So, okay. Do you agree with me that basically every 6 months, Benjamin Netanyahu gives a big speech somewhere about how all the Jews in Israel are on the verge of annihilation?
There is that tendency, yes.
Yes, basically every 6 months, they're always on the verge. Iran's about to nuke them. They're about to get invaded. Yeah. Somebody's about to destroy Israel every 6 months, right? What is he banking on there with that? What is Kufi banking on there?
And then somehow their intelligence reports tell us who we got to go blow up for. Funny how they always coincide like that. They always just line up perfectly for them.
By playing these speeches, right, money. They want money to flow in, things like this to flow in, military aid to flow in. The idea here is you're not blessing Israel if you're not participating with Israel. You see, they're almost about to be annihilated.
Yeah, but you can't point to scripture.
They were almost about to be annihilated last week and the week before. None of this is scriptural.
It almost seems like they can't get along with anyone, doesn't it?
It's all indoctrination.
And we're talking about Christians. This sucks.
Yes, I know, but none of it's scriptural, but it's all indoctrination. But the thing is when Ted Cruz says bless Israel, he does mean that. He does mean if we need to send troops against our enemies, we will. If we need to send missile defense systems, we will. If we need to send treasure and blood, we'll send that too. But that's what he's saying.
Yeah, so I agree with all that, and that makes sense to me, right? My thing is that I think Ted could base his entire argument on his misunderstanding of Genesis, wherever it is, according to him. Somewhere in the Genesis, if you pull up the Googles, and anytime you use the in front of something, you're an idiot. But
the Genesis,
the Genesis or the Googles, right? Yeah, so I think he would point to that and be like, "That's it." And that's the kind of eschatology that I have heard of. It's not that the Christians need to do anything. I mean, that's almost like the view of Iran. Like they have this kind of apocalyptic eschatology where the conflict around the world globally will bring back the 12th Imam, right? So that's the beginning of their eschatological book. And people are like, well, you said they're a death cult. They're going to blow themselves up. I'm like, well, no, they don't. It's not them that's going to die. It's the world being in conflict. Like there is a connection there. I don't see that in Christianity, though.
Maybe we're putting the cart before the horse. Let's back up and kind of define some terms, right? So first, when you say eschatology, what do you mean by that?
The study of the end times or the things of the end times.
Okay. And you would include Revelation,
Daniel, Ezekiel, a bunch of different places that have small references, large references, Thessalonians, things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So got it. So now the audience knows that too. And then when you say Zionism, would a fitting definition of Zionism, at least in modernity, and I would even argue in its inception, be that the modern nation state of Israel, you support the existence of the modern nation state of Israel. That is Zionism.
That's fair. I don't think there's any debate about that being kind of the basis. I know some people have additional things they throw in it, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if you're a Christian Zionist, you have to support the existence of the modern nation. So if somebody comes out...
Where does money come into that? Where does that turn into? We have to send them money. I don't
every 6 months and says the existence of this
and pretend like they're an ally that does nothing for us.
Thing is about to not exist anymore, right? Then you're under the obligation as a Christian Zionist to do what?
Whatever the Bible tells you to.
Well, if you're a Christian Zionist, though, by definition, you would be a Christian who believes that the nation state of Israel needs to exist. Not only has a right to, but needs to exist. So if that's the case, if they come out and say, hey, every few months, we're about to not exist, the Iran's about to nuke us, the Turks are going to invade, the Muslims are blowing us up in the street, the Palestinians are stabbing our children in the face, whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
the Christian Zionist, the Christian Zionist says what? No, we got to support the right to exist, blood, treasure, everything else. Now, I do think that moves into the idea of eschatology, especially because I do think that they believe, Christian Zionists do believe, that it's through this support that they're going to be blessed from God, and that these things are necessary for the end times to come about. And I do think that they're trying to accelerate the end times. I think that the whole point of searching out these red heifers and doing all of these things is for the purposes of the acceleration project. And that's what I think it is.
Maybe. So I saw the red heifer thing. And for those of you who don't know, that's how they have to be able to burn a pure red heifer. I don't think they've had those for a very long time. They got them from Texas. So
Yeah.
Texas saved the wine industry when phylloxera went through in France. You're welcome.
Save the end of the world.
Basically, yes. And apparently our red heifers are going to be used to consecrate the implements of the temple and the temple itself. So that's a really big thing. If they don't
Sounds
have
like
that,
voodoo.
they can't really build it. But I would say that none of this necessarily, and I really do mean that, none of this necessarily means that Christians are trying to be accelerationists. Again, that's a very new thing for
Not
me to
Christians.
hear. So
I think that
Christian Zionists, even
yeah,
I mean, they're
well,
Christians.
Christian Zionists. I think that their only justification, if I were to walk them through this logically, and I can tell you why I think this. When I asked my debate opponent in this debate, I said, so even if it's the case that 1/3 of the nation currently supports movement towards Antichrist, we should support him. He said, yes. Yes. Why? Because there's a preconditional there. These things need to happen in order for, and Charlie Kirk, by the way, has said this openly. These events prophetically need to happen in order for the end times to be ushered in anyway.
Well, but
so I
just
do
because
think
those
it's an
events-
accelerationist agenda.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but just because
No, you're
those
good.
events need to happen doesn't mean that I am the one that is going to make them happen.
Agreed.
Like, so you can
But you're
have,
not
like,
a Christian Zionist.
No, you just send your money to Israel and they'll make it happen for you, Gerald. Good point.
Okay, well, but I would have said probably more so specifically at two churches ago. Yeah, there was a church that I went to where I ran into this quite a bit. They support Israel, even with people kind of splintering off. And man, if you haven't had a prayer shawl and you haven't done these things, you really have never connected to God. And I'm like, well, hold on, let's talk about this a little bit, because that's not really scriptural. I don't understand what you're talking about. But I would have said what Ted Cruz said. Those that bless Israel will be blessed. Those that curse Israel will be cursed. And that's not what scripture says. Just to be clear, 12:3 says that if they bless you, he's talking about Abraham and he's talking about a people. That's very clear.
Actually,
right?
this is a really good segue here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's explore this. When you were that person who would have answered the way Ted Cruz did,
Yeah.
if a guy like me said, okay, what does blessing them mean? You would probably give the same answer of like, yeah, you got to support them and this and
I'd
that.
probably say
right?
mostly the prayer side of things. I mean, obviously, I couldn't move government, but I've never
Sure.
felt compelled to give financially to purely Israel-related goals. Like missionaries in Israel, yeah, I felt financially moved to like give
But if I
to
ask you
convert
this
to Christ.
question then, this is in support of movement towards Antichrist, movement towards the naming by Jews of their what we would consider a false Messiah. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You'd have to concede that point. What would your answer have been from that, Gerald?
Well,
what would you have said?
if somebody had told me, because at the time I was very, very into studying eschatology, because I was specifically teaching a class called A Christian's Response to Islam, and I was teaching how Islamic eschatology and Christian eschatology are actually incredible in that they overlap and they're exactly inverse, right, with the characters and their attributes and everything else. So I was into that. I would have never said that I thought that this would have been a push towards Antichrist. Supporting Israel would have necessarily meant that I was supporting a push towards Antichrist. I still don't believe that that's necessarily the case either, because I don't think it is absolute that my support for Israel is going to push them to name a false Messiah. I see it as something that God has commanded me to do. So when I pray for the peace of Jerusalem as commanded in the Psalms, or if I pray, or if I live my life in such a way as Romans 11 says, when Paul's telling you, like, make them jealous of you, that's supporting Israel in my mind. Mm-hmm. It's not a financial thing, and it's not pushing for any Antichrist or temple or anything that can be misconstrued. So at that time, I probably would have told you, like, pushing for Antichrist.
Would you pray for any other group that's moving towards Antichrist?
I would pray for every single other group who's moving towards Antichrist. I would pray for all of them.
What would be special about Israel?
Nothing. That's my whole point. Like, my whole point is, like, I feel like Christians have kind of messed that up. Like, I pray for them like I pray for everybody else.
Okay.
God is not done with them.
Okay.
So then there's no special blood here. There's no special nothing here.
I mean, God is not done with Israel is a very kind of vague term. And I've said it a number of times, and I haven't dived to the depths of what that exactly means. But my belief is that there's a reason that, and this is where maybe we would disagree on eschatology, that is it safe to say that you probably hold more of an orthodox position on eschatology, that most of the book of Revelation has been completed up till about the 20th chapter or so?
Duh.
Well, look, I'm not a specialist in orthodox eschatology.
Right.
That's a study all in and of itself.
Tough. Jeez.
It is. The thing is, though, what I will say is this, and there's people I would recommend actually to have discussions on eschatology. The things that I mostly focus on these days are mostly church history. And the idea is that, especially now in the last year, it's become very politically relevant to dive into what's going on with what church fathers said about who Israel is, who the people of Israel are, what Christianity means, what our obligations are, especially when it comes to other nations, including any perceived Jewish nation, right?
Yeah.
And none anywhere in church history can you find anybody, any Christians anywhere talking about how if Jews establish a nation, then that's what Israel is. They always considered Israel to be us. We are the spiritual continuation, right? That's what Christians are. We're the spiritual continuation.
You
of the
heretic,
promise
other
to
than
Abraham.
Galatians 3, you son of a gun. Most people don't know that, Andrew. Like that's, so listen,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I had this, so people that have pitched replacement theology as this word, I think have done a very effective job, because there are a lot of people who think the Jews are responsible for every single ill that the world has ever heard of, that would use replacement theology as, yes, the church replaced Israel, to mean that God does not have any future plan to the Jews at all and that they were never special. Paul dispenses with that in Romans. Like, don't be arrogant. Are you kidding? The natural branch can be thrown off.
Yeah, and we don't follow replacement theology.
Right. You don't.
Either.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a fair kind of critique.
It's not. It's not a fair. Well, but I understand what you're saying. But the idea here is just, this question is old. It's an old question, and it's a very difficult one to even ask, which is, who are the Jews? Who are they?
Well, but that's easy.
Be snappy.
And here's why I say that. Not the bloodline part of it. That's a little bit more complicated, because
That's
I know
harder, right?
Yeah, it's way more complicated, because by the numbers, I believe more of the Palestinians that live there have more Jewish blood than maybe some of the Ashkenazi Jews or anybody else that would maybe lay claim to being the Jews of that land. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, you can have that conversation, but Galatians 3:29, I'll just read it. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. That makes it very, 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 very clear. Like, who is Abraham's seed? Who are the sons of Abraham? And I think what they were trying to say is, like, guys, we didn't start a new thing. This is the continuation of the thing, which means we were all a part of this. If you're God outside of time, the church is the church throughout the Old Testament too. Right? It's not a new thing that we've created. It is just the thing. And
you can also find this. It's not just there, but I mean, there's tons of references moving into it. You have Malachi 1:11. God promises his name shall be made great among the Gentiles who across the world will offer incense, the pure sacrifice to him. The church is the fulfillment of that sacrifice. That's what it is. So the thing is, though, is that you have to dispense with dispensationalism, right? And the problem
you can't use words like that, Andrew. You're better than that.
Yeah, but the idea here,
I like it better when they don't get along,
is this: Kufi will always be running, and so will probably Mossad, Israeli intelligence, everybody else. So probably always be running counter propaganda against both the Roman Catholic and Orthodox Church, because
and only half of them deserve it, and we know which.
Yeah, well, because they don't follow this Protestant form of theology, and this nun was completely correct when she pointed this out. We don't follow that form of theology, and so that is an existential threat to places like Kufi, as you see these traditional churches beginning to gain a lot of ground in the United States. Their percentages are beginning to increase, and as kind of support wanes for Israel, you're going to see a lot more of kind of the megala power preachers preaching more of this type of gospel, because if they can't bamboozle you into support through victimhood, they're going to try to bamboozle you into support through your theology. Yeah, and that's what's actually going on, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think I don't feel like this is the driving. This might get me in trouble. I don't feel like this is the driving kind of problem with dispensationalism that a lot of people do. Like, let me say it the reverse. Is this the only problem that you have with dispensationalism?
No, of course not.
Okay, so I didn't think so, but
one rooted piece of bad theology has a tendril which destroys all other branches of theology. So that's why having a strong root leads to good theological branches. Bad roots have bad theological branches, because you have to reinterpret
you can get
all
further
kinds
and further
things
away from the truth very easily. So I definitely agree with that. So in dispensationalism, that's a topic for another time. But I imagine that I would have grown up in fairly dispensational churches. But
Sure. Me too.
I was never like guilted into giving to Israel. I was never guilted into supporting Israel. We never had Kufi representatives in any of the churches that I went to. And I was very heavily involved in some of these churches, some very big kind of mega churches by a lot of people's standards. But what I hope the audience so far, what I hope you guys have gotten is it's okay to talk about what the Bible actually says. It sometimes gets sensationalized and Scripture says what Scripture says, but when you immediately go from, somebody like Ted Cruz, like if you're just making an honest argument, well, I thought that Genesis 12:3 said that if I bless Israel, that I'll be blessed. It's okay to correct and be like, actually, it's saying that if you bless Abraham and his descendants, and okay, let's look to the New Testament to see. Very Protestant point of view here. I know I'm not going to look to tradition as much, though I don't hold tradition as worthless. I actually hold it as very valuable. But what does the Bible say about the people that are Israel? Okay, it's very clear. Okay, Paul helps us out here. Galatians, fantastic, because they were wrestling with these same issues. And they were resting on their Jewishness for salvation. And he's like, guys, that's not going to do it. Like work. That is, you have to accept Christ. Otherwise, none of it matters. So don't go down that path. But if you don't have that conversation with somebody and you immediately go to the synagogue of Satan revelation argument, it's like, well, okay, well, like you're not going to convert anybody that way, because aren't theoretically to some degree everybody who denies Christ a part of the synagogue of Satan? Essentially, they may have a different branch that they got to it, but the root is Satan, right? And it may be the atheistic branch, or it may be the, I'm going to adhere to only the Old Testament Judaism branch, or what. It's all the synagogue of Satan. So why be sensational about it? Not you, but the people that make that argument. And it derails the conversation before it can get started.
Well, because this has great political power. So, this type of theology itself has massive political power. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah. It does. If you want to get things like abortion moved and things like that, who are you going to tap into? You're going to tap into Christians.
Women.
You're not going to tap into a bunch of blue-haired leftists, right?
Right.
You're going to tap into Christians. And by the way, for women, there's like a bit more support on just all females polled for abortion than against, right?
Yeah.
So you have to offset this with Christianity. So anytime these different places can politicize the religion and point to it as you ought do this thing, and just so happens to coincide with exactly what I politically desire, right? You got to be somewhat wary about that. And in this case, I see that the government of Israel has spent millions of dollars funneling to the Temple Institute, that Kufi has used back channels, and this is publicly available information, though it's very difficult to prove how much they've sent. It's very clear that Kufi has sent tons and tons of money, which has ended up in the hands of the Israeli government. Again, I don't think that these things are even particularly controversial to say.
No.
The thing that is though controversial to say is to say this: that as a Christian, you have zero moral ought whatsoever to support a nation state, an ethno-nationalist Jewish nation state, because they take the name Israel. That's a word concept fallacy. By the way, the original Zionists and the Zionist Congresses, they were debating multiple names for this land, not just Israel. They decided on Israel. And the whole thing is a word concept fallacy. You can't really think that Genesis is referencing the modern nation state and its current government with Benjamin Netanyahu at the head of it. There's no way to draw these parallels unless you're just really not paying attention.
Yeah, and that's it's so obvious. Like this is the part of
like Senator Ted Cruz,
the debate that's so obvious that I wanted to correct it early, right? Where people are having this conversation online. I'm like, we need to move past like the basics. The basics are Israel is not, and Ted Cruz couldn't answer this. And Ted Cruz was, when he said in that interview that he wanted to be the staunchest ally in the United States government for the state of Israel, and I'm very loosely paraphrasing. I got really close.
And uses the Bible to justify it.
And then uses the Bible to justify it. But he uses Genesis to say this is why I support them, not any eschatology. And so that's why I think there is a little bit of a disconnect. We can dive into that maybe more another time or later today.
Sure.
But
I do think that they're connected. I wanted to move into,
don't derail. But I think that's the problem that we have. And that's why I use that clip, because I'm like, this highlights the issue right here. Yeah. We can't have a basic conversation about this because Tucker is rightfully pointing out, and by asking questions, maybe at this point that are a bit snarky because they had been going at each other for a little bit.
What is snarky about anything Tucker said? He said exactly the way it should have been said.
Like 50 minutes into the interview.
Tone policing.
Ted couldn't answer them. Who is Israel? Did it say Israel? It didn't say Israel, by the way. If anybody had had a Bible and showed it to him, it would have been like, show me Israel. The nation state that existed, Ted wouldn't really concede the point, like, okay, fine. It's not like the borders that are drawn here. It really is the people of God. Wherever
He didn't even know where at in the Bible his theology comes from. He had no idea. So he couldn't tell you if it said Israel or not.
they happen to be. So, for example, and I think this is the point that you're making, if after World War II, instead of the Jews fighting for a homeland in Palestine,
He feels that way because the Hasbara tour cash, the check cleared. That's why.
or that region, if they decided to go to New Jersey instead and set up like their own thing in New Jersey, and the United States government did it like the Indian reservation and said, here's some land, here's some sovereignty, then we would call that Israel to a degree. We would be like, that's the people of God that the Bible is talking about, not a nation state, not a border, not even a name. They can call themselves something else, New Israel. I don't know, like whatever it is. And I think that's the point that a lot of people don't understand. And it certainly had nothing to do with the political leaders. For example, if Israel tomorrow, Netanyahu decided to nuke Paris, are we supposed to support that as Christians?
Yeah, of course.
No,
That's
of course not.
ridiculous, right?
Yes, exactly. But it paints
And he could, because he lies, he does have nuclear capability.
the picture for people like, of course not. Okay, so there is some degree of support that maybe as Christians you can verify or justify.
I think some of this comes up with this idea of, so I think many on the political right and even now the political left are beginning to question something which is important here, which is, has Israel actually done a good job of protecting Jews?
That's a great question.
The idea here was that Israel itself needed to be established as a nation because of the atrocities that happened during World War II and the Holocaust,
and prior.
in order to protect this group from future persecutions which may happen to them.
Yeah.
It has not done that. Now, I don't know. I've never actually heard anybody make an objective case for how Israel has done anything to protect Jews. And I went back and I looked as a reference point before we had this conversation at some of the early Congresses. And one objection that came up, which was interesting, a guy objected and said, look, Western nations are really starting to accept us now. They're starting to accept us in. They're starting to we're integrating now basically everywhere. And by the way, even right now, more Jews live outside of Israel than inside of it, and mostly inside of Western nations, right?
And the United States is number one, I believe, right?
Yeah, number one, sure. Yeah. And then, of course, you have Western Europe that has tons, and et cetera, et cetera. But the idea here that he was saying was actually, I think if you wanted to put all the Jews in one spot, right, and it's established as sovereign, that we're going to end up having to be a protectorate. We're going to have protectors for us, in these places. Whereas if they stayed in the Western nations rather than congregating into a Jewish state, the Western nations have always prioritized their security, just like all of their citizens, right? So the United States prioritizes their security as much as they prioritize mine. Prioritize the security in England as much as they do their citizens, France, et cetera, et cetera. I
have a question here. Why do they need protection from everybody? We don't hear about Switzerland needing our protection. Why does Israel need the protection? Because they're spies and they get in everyone's shit. They try to get in everyone's country. I'm not anti-Jewish. I love my Jewish comedians in America. I have no one else that can make me laugh, but I just hate Israel.
Is it that this nation state actually makes Jewish people safer? And that's not a question that I think is easily answered. And that leads to a lot of this stuff as well. I think a lot of because God tells us we have to bless them, is cope, because they can't create a justification for how the state has actually protected Jews.
I think. But I have to ask you a question first. Are you making this argument today, or are you making this argument in, say, the early 1900s? Or both?
I would even make it today.
Okay. Well, I think today it's easier to make because I think you're right. There's a lot more acceptance, and there are a lot more options for Jews today to be able to go to different countries. And I'll let me just kind of lay this case out for you. So I did some searching on this because I thought it was an interesting question that you posed. And I don't know that it's a question that I really gave a lot of thought to before. I've done a significant amount of research in the last month on this topic of the Jews and pre-1948 Jews. And I don't know if you're like this, where you get on a topic like this and you just watch every movie that you can watch, you read every book, you listen to every podcast, like everything that you can try to find to just kind of ingest information. And so sometimes you have to weed stuff out. But since 1948, I looked this up, the murder of Jews worldwide has been approximately 25,000 due to pogrom style or like terrorist attacks, right? Since the inception of the state. Just in the Ukraine pogroms in 1918 to 1921, 50 to 100,000 Jews were killed. So get rid of the Holocaust, so there's no debate there, because I know there's a lot of people that debate numbers, and I don't want to get into that. I'm not saying you do. I'm saying I know a lot of people watching this would. So just based on the numbers alone, and the search that I did went back to 1848. I tried to do some kind of a comparison. Then I went from like 1900.
Now, Gerald,
but that's not the only metric. So I agree that.
Hang on. Now do American black people.
American black people. How many black people were killed?
Yeah, well, how many black people traditionally were persecuted just inside of the United States in various states, as in comparison to right now, even though black people have no official state, right?
No. So that's fair.
So isn't it actually the case that what's going on is that as time has progressed and tolerance has progressed, along with our views in science and how humans interact with each other, the views of technology with correspondence of different races and culture, that people have become more tolerant towards other groups other than their own.
Maybe.
Even if Israel had not had a state, let's say, this established nation, which by the way was at war since its inception.
Yeah, day one.
Yeah, day one. Can you honestly say that you think that Jewish persecution would have risen or dropped? Because I would just argue that based on every other objective metric I can see in the West for every other race and group, that it still would have drastically decreased.
Yeah, but that's the United States.
The West, the entire West. That would be Australia, Western Europe. It would even include Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union.
You couldn't predict those things.
You can make the same predictive metrics based on how they treat other outlier groups, right?
Yeah, no, I that's fair. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you couldn't that's why I asked you when you're making the argument. If you're making the argument today, it presupposes that Israel exists and all of the impacts of Israel existing and having relations with 160 countries and being a UN recognized country has happened, right? And I think that's part of honestly what has led Israel to at least have more options, right? As a nation state. So my argument would be, I think generally speaking, you can make a pretty good case that we have become more tolerant, especially in the United States. In Europe, yes and no. I still see a lot of the problems. The numbers probably bear out that you're correct, though, as far as murders. Like if we're looking at what I was looking at, like just the murders that are happening based on
it's going to be night and day.
Wouldn't think it'd be close. Yeah, right. But can you bet on that when you're trying to figure out what to do in the early 1900s and you're living through the pogroms that are happening, not just in Russia and Ukraine, but are happening in Poland and in France and in all of these different countries, and you're a Jew going, what the hell do we do?
I think you can. I think you can because most Jews didn't actually migrate to Israel. So they must not have thought that their safety was going to be determined
most Jews
on
didn't
the
migrate
state.
When they...
Yeah, that's correct. Most Jews globally did not migrate to Israel.
Fair, but there's a reason for that.
Then there is, because most of them must not have thought that their safety was nearly as much in jeopardy as you seem to claim. Right?
I don't think so, because at the time they seem to. I mean, obviously they're not a monolith, right? If you're successful and you're in other countries, so really what happened in the 1920s, right after the frickin' Ukraine pogroms, the 50 to 100,000, some estimates are a little higher than that, but it was a Jewish website and I didn't want to be called a Zionist again. You can
grant whatever numbers.
Whatever the numbers are.
But the same argument.
But right after that, you have people all of a sudden doing financially better because of the Roaring 20s, right? Mm-hmm. Right after that. You got the First World War out of the way. People are doing financially better. People have better things to do than worry about who's to blame for their problems. Right. But then things start to go south again, and all of a sudden you've got people looking for somebody to blame for their problems. There were tons of people who were doing well off that could stay wherever they were and thought it was better to do that. You're right. There was a lot of agreement of people staying where they were. But there were a lot of people pushing and fighting to create a homeland too, someplace that they could seek refuge in. So
well, it wasn't that big, right?
To be dismissed. It was big enough.
I'm not sure it was.
How many?
I'm not sure it was all that big. I don't know. I would say somewhere around 10% were really pushing towards this idea, who were indoctrinated towards it. by early Zionist leaders. And the thing is that if it was
Indoctrinated towards
truly
it, like in a negative way, or just, you just mean, like,
it was all well. There was tons of propaganda from the Jewish congresses. There was tons and tons of propaganda. There was whole books written about.
No, for sure, but they wanted a homeland. That's not a bad thing, right?
I'm not saying no. I'm not saying that.
Yeah,
I'm not saying whether or not sovereign peoples have the ability on land which they acquire through whatever means they acquired it to have rights to that land. I'm not making any disputes there. I guess my only dispute here is whether or not the land itself has done much to increase the security for Jews globally, which is what the Zionists promised us it would do, and what Christian Zionists still to this day demand.
It doesn't increase your security if you pick fights with all your neighbors for generations.
That Israel be kind of raised up, and whatever we need to do to make sure that they're doing well, because that is a safe haven against the potential of future atrocities towards the Jewish people. I would just argue that vision was not realized, that the nation state of Israel did not actually do anything to protect Jews globally. Nothing. Well, and rather it was just the march and progress of technologies and opening up the various spaces of communication between people groups, which began to erode many of those ancient prejudices.
So I hope you're right. I hope the march of progress is the thing that we can point to. Because if I were Jewish and I had grandparents that lived through some of the things that happened to Jews out of nowhere, like literally out of nowhere, like one day you've got a shop and maybe you're not the most popular person in town, but you're certainly not a pariah worthy of being dragged out in the streets and beaten to death. And the next day, all of a sudden you are. Like, the calculus to me would be a lot different. And I agree with you that not everybody felt that way, because not everybody lived that experience, right? Especially at the time. So I can't say that Jews in the United States experienced that, though they certainly did experience a ton of anti-Semitism here in the United States and a ton of mistreatment here in the United States. It wasn't just in Germany. This was around the world.
Well, I don't dispute any of this. I'm just pointing out that we can look at other people groups in almost every European nation and inside all of what you would consider the Western nations. This would include Australia, right? Even just look at the Aboriginals in Australia. You can look at American blacks. You can look at even South America and in Canada with the treatment of the natives there. You can look everywhere and see that the tolerance when it comes to the persecution of these various races and things like this was already on the turn by the mid-40s. I mean, you have to remember that the military was already beginning its march towards desegregation inside of the army. Inside of World War II, this was already happening. So the idea also in Europe, you had under Mussolini, they were allowing miscegenation. That was basically unheard of, and they were allowing miscegenation all through Italy. So these types of things, when it came to persecute, the barriers were already breaking down before there was ever an established state for Jews anyway. So I would just argue that we can look around at other marginalized peoples, right, if you want to call them that, and say, okay, you went through horrific experiences also. There was no nation state for your people to flee to, and yet still it seems that many of these groups are far less marginalized or persecuted than they were once upon a time. So I'm not so sure how Israel did much for that. It seemed to put or tons of Jews in one spot, and then that spot's just open for endless attack. It just seems so stupid to me.
It does have some disadvantages, shall we say, for sure.
Their plan would have worked just fine if they could have just got along with their neighbors and everyone else in the region.
All of those people. It's like when you get pedophiles together for a convention, you know where to bomb, right?
Right.
You know how to take. So I understand the point, and I'm not comparing Jews to pedophiles, by the way. Gosh, that's just going to light some people on fire. I know.
And I understand that each group's going to have a different subset of experiences. Now, when you're playing the oppression Olympics, right, I know that various groups are always going to say, I was more oppressed than this group, I was more oppressed than that group, et cetera, et cetera. But
this was before a lot of the Epstein stuff came out, too.
To discount the fact that there's the human experience is filled with 2,000 years of this group oppressing this group oppressing that group, et cetera, et cetera. And it's gonna end up being that way. We're always going to match up tribe versus tribe. That just seems to be part of the human experience. But I would just argue that even before that, the state was established as a nation, it was very clear that many of these traditional prejudices were already beginning to break down as technology advanced and people groups were able to intersect with each other much more often.
I don't disagree outside of the experience of Jews in Europe specifically. I think the Jews in Europe, what they were experiencing was a tightening and something that they probably never in their wildest dreams thought was going to happen, specifically in Germany, then Czechoslovakia, then Poland, then, moving onward, right? It was almost like a savior day when Russia comes in and kicks the Germans out, which should never be the case, right? But so I guess that's my point. I don't know that I agree completely. I understand where you're coming from. I do think that technology, I do think that other factors over the years have made it to where we are much more tolerant. But if you are a Jew in the early part of the 20th century and you're trying to figure out how to live life and you are starting to see these things happen, I understand why you would want a place of refuge, because people weren't taking them in, including the United States.
Look, I understand. Crazy. I understand that too. I just also understand the early Zionist counter arguments from within their own ranks from the Jewish Congress.
They wanted to have influence.
Don't you think they should have kind of tried to get along with all their neighbors then instead of blowing them up?
They wanted to have
they were also
abroad.
trying to say, like, look, we have homes and families, and we've been established in some of these areas for several hundred years, and we don't want to uproot and go. And we think that this will cause a brand new wave of anti-Semitism where people can draw all their ire on a single place and then attack it. And they kind of have. Right?
Yeah, but they've defended that very well, and their numbers haven't lost as many.
We have defended it. The very same nations which people would claim were the biggest persecutors are actually the very nations which are providing all of the security for the state of Israel. So it's like, how would they not have been safer just staying in those nations?
Well, no, at the time that's not foreseeable is my point. Like, you can't look to the future and see that all of a sudden, I mean, maybe you could predict that Britain would. You certainly couldn't predict that France would. And you certainly even couldn't predict that Britain would, because at the time, whenever the Balfour Declaration was, I mean, I know that's a lot earlier, but let's say they set up the state, like, they were attacking the British to get them the hell out of there. So they couldn't think.
No, they had tons of security. They had tons of security and weapons agreements with Western nations. Where do you think they were getting their weapons and their tanks and everything else?
I don't disagree, but they
were getting them from Western nations. And the thing is so funny is, like, the very same nations which Jews fled out of in order to move in to the nation of Israel are the very same nations that they are banking on right this second.
Yeah, but they weren't worried about France and Britain. They were worried about Germany and Italy. They were worried about those people coming after them, and rightfully so. It happened. I mean, you said that they didn't see the threat. That's one of the major kind of problems with what happened leading up to the Holocaust was that so many Hungarian and Polish Jews didn't perceive the threat. I have businesses here. I've lived here for 200 years. I've got family. I've got prosperity. I've got a successful, thriving business. Well, the next day they didn't. The next day they were herded onto a train car.
That's true.
I'm
not disputing any of that. I'm just pointing out that the edge of your argument, while it's rational, it's a good rational argument. Mm-hmm. The idea is, like, look, if you're in an era of rampant persecution, this would really seem like a good idea. In
some sense, at least.
But the only problem is that the argument has a double edge, which is if you can't determine the future for security inside of the nation states you're in and perceive that they'll lighten up against your people group, there's no reason for you to assume that they would lighten up against the state.
Well, okay,
so moving into this state, you would think would put a massive target on your back. And how would you defend the state, right? That's the question. So you must have some security agreements in place, some ways in which this state will be defended. So I would just point out, like,
go
ahead.
I think the or part to that is, or you're at a point where I would rather fight for a homeland than be killed tomorrow in a pogrom. I'm at the point now where I can't. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go for it. But I do believe that you're correct in that the Jews had a very, very good strategy early on to get support from other countries, specifically Britain and the United States, but also other countries around the world to a lesser degree. And that was one of their main goals, is to make sure that Jews in those countries would put pressure. In fact, that was one of the levering tools that they used against the British. Don't make me make the Jews rise up against you in these other countries and you lose support in this war. Like, listen, I get it. But here's the thing. The United States did the same thing. We basically said, screw this. We have people, like, we had our own place. I get it that we weren't going to a brand new place, but initially we did. We went to a place and we said, screw it. We're done with this. There's no way we should be able to defeat them. And by the way, the only way we can possibly win this war is if we get the Native Americans to some degree on our side and the French to come over here with some ships and blow stuff up. We did the same thing. So I don't look at Israel as being kind of this unique case in that regard. And the persecutors
I'm not disputing that. I agree with you that if the idea here is just to say whether or not sovereign peoples are allowed to create states, and they don't need to give endless justifications for their state, then I agree.
But they were dependent wholly on other people, and so were we to protect. Well, we fought,
this is the
don't
thing,
get me
though.
wrong, but
if I ask, it was the United States as an establishment, if it said it was there to protect this group of people, right? Did it live up to its promise of protecting that group of people? I would say in the United States definitely lived up to its promise of protecting its citizens.
Christians.
I don't think you can cut that any other way. It really did live up to its promise of protecting its citizens, at least to a large degree. Did Israel, though, live up to its promise of protecting Jews, especially Jews globally? That, I think, you can definitely make a case against.
Yeah, so to Steelman, kind of what you're saying, you agree that the number of people murdered and the deaths, that metric would seem like it does, but maybe it's attributable to other things than having a state. Maybe the number of Jews globally murdered pre-1948 being so much higher than it is now, maybe that was attributable to something other than them having a nation state in the first place.
Yes, okay. I would just argue back that I guess the crux of my argument would be that I don't think that the nation state of Israel being established has reduced the number of deaths of Jews globally, but rather has likely exacerbated it over time.
By a lot. By a lot. I saw a special the other night where they had Orthodox Jews talking about how much they hate Israel. In America, they were in New York. They were New York Jews, and they hate Israel too because it's getting them so much anti-Semitism from the shit that Israel keeps doing.
More than the alternative. And while I agree that there was rampant persecution going on at the time of Jews, that's not even in dispute. Along with many, many other groups. I would just point out that the reason that many of those other groups, this oppression is all but virtually gone, including in the Western nation against Jews individually. Now, I know that you get he put a, fucking Nazi thing on my garage or whatever, shit like that.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
That ain't like, they lined us up and put us in front of ditches and pulled the trigger, right? These are, we got different
straight hours.
Yeah, we got different levels of this. Yeah. Okay, we got different levels of this. So if that's the complaint, then it's like, well, okay, maybe you got to do something about that too. But I don't think that it's reaching these critical heights like we're discussing before. Yeah. So did it live up to its idea of protect? And even right now in modernity, is it living up to the idea of protecting Jews, or is it putting a target on their back globally due to what's going on with Palestine and due to what's going on with their intelligence, working with MI6 and the CIA and many others, Mossad interference? American people seem to not be happy about it, along with the peoples of the West. That does not seem like it's assisting with protecting Jews. So, I think there's a good case to be made the other way.
I mean, I don't completely disagree, but I think I would lean more towards the state of Israel being a net positive for them and having an impact on that, because throughout human history, for some reason, the Jews seem to be, and it's not the oppression Olympics necessarily. It's just like, why do they
tell that to the Orthodox Jews who are getting beat up on the subway because people are anti-Semitic because of what Israel's doing, Gerald?
Keep getting singled out in these different countries. Historically, are they really that weird? Are they that Jewy to some degree that they just are so off-putting to people no matter where they happen to go? They end up being the scapegoat. I don't know. I really do look at more of a spiritual battle than anything else. Like if they are in fact God's chosen people, anybody, let's just, without defining who God's people are, but anybody who wears the team jersey for being a Jew, if those are God's people, then if I was Satan, of course I would go after them, as well as Christians, right? I wouldn't exclusively go after them. I would do both, right? And try to maybe make the promises of God completely fail. That would be my target. That's what Satan tried to do completely in Scripture. Is like, I'm going to make God's promises be broken to these people, and it's gonna completely shatter everything. So I do think that it has had a net positive impact, but I understand the case. How about this? Do you
think in the future it will continue to?
That's actually where I was going. Yes and no. I think
we're all going to the future
now is a great example of no. Right now with what's going on. Now here's my argument. And we don't have to get too much into Gaza, but I'm glad to see that Dave Smith has come around to my point of view, and he will hate that I said that, by the way.
It's good for Dave.
Yeah. So Douglas Murray actually gave an interview, and I think it was with Piers Morgan, where he said one of the main problems in this conflict is that nobody has been allowed to win. Israel obviously would win in any war against Gaza or Hezbollah or any of these other groups.
It wouldn't even be a war. It would just be, they would...
Not Iran.
Yeah.
Walk right in, completely destroy everything. And I think no matter...
Except for the nukes.
Or what side of this you come down on, if you look at it objectively, Israel has taken extraordinary measures during a war to make sure they minimize civilian casualties. That doesn't mean that they have minimized civilian casualties, though. Again, this is one of those places where people will immediately run to the extremes. And I'm like, listen, of course there have been crazy amounts of casualties of innocent people, and I hate it. I think it's terrible. That's why I hate war. But I understand war's place in history, and so that's why you don't start war for no reason. Like you weigh the cost of doing something like this. But if Israel had been allowed to win, I don't know, in 2005 or in 2003, or pick a date, right? And actually win. And I mean win-win, to the point of you've degraded the enemy so much that they have to come to the table and accept the terms that you put forth, or just capitulate completely and there are no terms, we now own your land and it's ours. Yeah. We wouldn't be dealing with these problems. The problem that I have with this entire thing is that it is an extension of human suffering. You're prolonging it, just like in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine. Nobody's going to win that war right now unless Russia goes to the nuclear toolbox.
Am I correct in assuming then what you're saying is this? If I can just summarize, make sure I got it right.
Yeah.
If they went in tomorrow and they butchered 1/3 of the Palestinians, but that led to an end of all conflict with Palestinians, are you saying that that would likely be preferable to an elongation, which actually led to the costing of far more life? If they didn't actually do that,
potentially. So yeah, I mean the hypothetical is that they'd have to butcher 1/3, and I mean
and you would have to have a crystal ball to know how the other way would work out.
Anytime any lives are lost in war, like I mean, there's a weight to that when you're talking about it. So
yeah, I understand the caveats. I understand the caveat.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, because here's the alternative. The alternative is, okay, well, what do we do about the current situation? Well, just stop the war, stop the killing. Let everything kind of go back to a neutral state. Okay, well, that's great as long as everybody wants to go back to a neutral state. The thing is they don't. And you can make the argument that the IDF doesn't want to go back to a neutral state either, right? So that's fine. But I know for sure Hamas doesn't. Their infrastructure is built on the fact that they are going to wage some kind of guerrilla-style warfare against these people for all time. So really what you're saying is, I want you to stop killing people in Gaza, and more Jews are going to die because of it. You're not saying that on purpose, not you, but the people making that argument. You're not saying it on purpose, but that really is what it leads to. So, you know, it is preferable to me to let this be finished. Hopefully it doesn't take killing 1/3 of the people there. I don't think that would be a very good or moral thing to do. But I hope that we can finish this war and get to a place of peace. And right now, and for decades, we have not. And I don't think we ever will until somebody wins. A two-state solution to me will never, ever, ever in the history of the world now and forever on work. Ever.
Work, yeah. Well, I understand
works in America. We have a whole bunch of state solutions. Why won't it work just with the nation of Israel? Because they're impossible to get along with. That's why.
I understand the 2 points. I just think that, let's start with the first one. I think it kind of negates your kind of earlier framing of this
crap.
as like a positive. If it's the case, you say Israel's not being allowed to win. They're not allowed to win. This means other states are holding them back from winning. That would again
by not sending them money for the bombs they're going to use to win.
Point out that Israel as a state itself has not necessarily been advantageous towards the protection.
No, it's still advantageous, but what Israel's leadership has done has capitulated to the demands of the rest of the world in this regard.
Then it hasn't really helped with the protection of Jews. It's leading to more Jews dying because nations
fewer Jews
are
have died, so it goes
back.
back to the number. It could be better, but it's not.
Wouldn't they have anyway? Wouldn't fewer Jews have died anyway? Is the question,
well,
right?
But according to you, yes, maybe.
Yeah, it's just kind of
I agree completely.
It's just kind of cycling the question, but that's the first one.
Okay.
I guess to the second point, though, the olive branches, like I agree with you when it comes to warfare. And this is the ugly truth. I've talked with Stephen about this. I'll talk with you about this. It doesn't matter which general you read, whether it's Sun Tzu or MacArthur. It doesn't matter, right? They would completely agree with this take. if it's the case that right now you can end an elongated conflict which will cost 1 million lives by taking 250,000 lives right now, including 100,000 innocents, because that'll lead to 600,000 innocents dying over time, then you should probably do that.
Yeah,
I get that. I understand that. It's just it comes down to a numbers game, and not every choice you can make is a good one.
No.
So you try to go for the choice which is the most moral with the least conditionals, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this case, there may not be any good options. But the fact of the matter is that all of this only happens at all if Israel is established as an Israeli ethno-Jewish state, an ethno-religious state. And that's why the conflict is going on right now, period. And there's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about that. And so you say, well, there's no more win conditions at this point. Maybe there's not any more win conditions. So what does that mean?
I think there are. I do.
Well, what are they?
Well, if Israel goes, listen, I'm not advocating for this, but this would definitely be a win for Israel. Let's say that right now, for some reason, Egypt decided to take some of these people in, and Jordan did too.
That's not going to happen.
They aren't going to do. Why?
Because they don't want them.
Exactly. They want them to be a thorn in the side of Israel.
Yes. They want
so they don't care about the lives of those people. And this is why I get pissed off at people like Dave Smith. And I have a lot of respect for him, more than other people do. And he's been right about a lot of stuff that I really appreciate. And I appreciate that he is anti-war. I get it. I wish I lived in the world where that didn't exist, but unfortunately it does. They don't care about the lives. They want to prolong the conflict. I have a problem with that happening in Ukraine. Our politicians don't care about the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. They just want to degrade Russia. And they'll let them be propped up and killing each other for as many years as they'd like to and buy weapons. Fantastic. That sucks. To me, that's immoral. So what I would like to see is people like Dave Smith say, Israel, you should do a better job. Hey, Egypt, what the hell are you doing? Open the gates. Let's set up an international camp. We won't even put them on your dole. We'll build a camp internationally, and we'll move these people out of there into that region, and we will let Israel take Gaza all the way to the sea and do whatever they want with it. That's not ethnic cleansing,
damn
genocide,
that libertarian sovereignty.
No,
damn that libertarian sovereignty. The idea there that these are sovereign nations and they're utilizing to their best of their ability political leverage to create a problem with
their
Israel.
Enemies.
And by the way, that it's working. Right?
It is. But I understand why Egypt would do it.
In the region.
Yeah, no, and look, I hope people understand. Like, if you've done any researching into the history of the formation of the state, you have to understand that Jews have been in that area for a long time too, and they lived in relative peace with the Arabs of the area.
They did.
And
they had pilgrimages going on for hundreds of years.
Oh yeah, and if I was an Arab, I would feel very much that I was in the right. I get it. I do get it, but it does come down to we won, you lost. The British made promises to the Arabs to try to overthrow the Ottoman Empire so that the Ottoman Empire couldn't fight them as effectively in World War I. They were struggling to have a survival of their society. I get it. But they made the promises to the French, and they made the promises to the Jews for that same land too. Britain was promising anybody, anywhere, anything if they would help them win this war in World War I.
Man, this thing went off the rails.
I know.
It went off the theological way.
No,
I guess it's all pertinent to it.
But it comes back down to what people's view is. So let me get back to what I said. I would agree if we let Israel win, if we let them push everybody out, and I feel like that's the worst case scenario, pushing everybody out. Push every single person out. If you can't trust anybody, bulldoze everything. Israel now owns that land, and we put Palestinians somewhere else in the world where they can live a life where they don't have to worry about their kids getting blown up at a McDonald's. Isn't that better than the alternative that we're being presented with? And the reason I brought Dave Smith up is because when he was talking about Ukraine and Russia, he said, listen, Russia came in and took some land. You said give it back. He said no. We have to deal with that reality and come to a negotiated agreement. Fantastic. Israel's going in and saying, we're going to just take this. The negotiated agreement was, hey, you've got to let the prisoners go. You got to lay your weapons down. Hamas has to be completely decapitated. You guys can't have this thing anymore. That's the condition. They said, no, okay, we're going in.
Well, let me ask you this. If it's the case, let's say that Israel struck a deal with, 20 different nations, right? Or let's just say 10. Let's make it easy. 10 different nations, Western nations, to disperse all Palestinian people between those nations. Yeah. Keep the families intact, this and that. Now they're out of Israel.
And set them up with some money.
And let's say, they pay a bounty, right? They pay a bounty of like $500,000 per family. This way they could be relocated and, there's all sorts of corruption watches on it, and they get all sorts of benefits. If you were those Palestinian families and you were moved into Western nations where there was now Jews who lived inside of those nations, who would you take your ire out on?
Maybe them.
Maybe them.
I get it,
So the
but it's
thing
going to
is,
happen
like,
one
I
way or the
wonder-
other.
Yeah. So, but if it does, how did that really make the world safer for Jews? Right.
Listen, I get it. There's no great answer to this. I think every one of the solutions that gets proposed has some kind of ripple effect problem. And even in my situation where I'm like, okay, just put them over in Egypt and build a camp until you can disperse them. Like, it doesn't mean that they're not going to come back and try to take their, ancestral home back.
As they should.
Maybe I would too. I don't know. I'm hoping that they wouldn't. I'm hoping that they go, you know what? This isn't worth it anymore. I get ancestral homeland, and maybe I'm an American and I don't have the same kind of tie to the land generationally that they do. And
They were there for thousands of years. And 60 years ago, Israel decides to make a nation right next to them and subjugate them. Yeah, I think I'd have some issues with it too.
can't completely understand. I get that. But at the same time, maybe this is a better option. But the reason, and I understand that this isn't as theological, but it does have a lot of bearing on the current situation and conversation, is that people start from the wrong points. They start from either 100% supporting Israel no matter what because of Christian Zionism.
Or 100% hating them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or 100% hating them. And you can't have that very kind of nuanced conversation where you and I are trying to save people's lives.
Geopolitics requires nuance because we have multiple people groups with multiple vested interests. It includes our people group in the United States, right? If it is the case that this reallocation happens, and I contend that that's the most likely scenario.
Yes, me
that
too.
Palestinians be relocated to another place. It's just if I'm President Wilson of the United States, God willing, if I'm President Wilson of the United States,
Woodrow, like why would you be him? That's
I'm
weird.
I'm kicking my feet up at my desk, right, asking for my third Diet Coke of the day while doing as little as possible.
Yeah.
While doing as little as possible as a good president should, and this comes across my desk, right? Okay, what do you think about 900,000 Palestinians coming into the United States to be dispersed all over the United States? The first thing that would come to my mind is they're going to start killing Jewish citizens. That's the very first thing that I would think of is that we're importing a massive terror cell who's going to start killing Jewish
citizens. Put them
citizens.
in Arab nations then. Put them with their own people, and if they have a problem with the Arabs,
the Arab nations won't take them.
That's their problem.
Because they want them to be there messing with the Jews.
Why are we playing
That's
the game
what they
then?
want.
Why are we playing that game?
Well, we don't have a choice.
We
What
do.
choice do
We can say,
can't-
you know
can't
what?
force them to.
You know what? No. I don't mean that. You're right. We can't force them to. I mean, we could airdrop them in with parachutes and stuff and say, good luck getting them out. But nonetheless,
and the Arabs
that's
might
impractical.
kill them too.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
Arabs might kill them too.
That's true. So there are not a lot of good options here. But I mean, we could just be like, all right, Arab nations, you care about your brothers in arms, right? You're going to be sending them weapons, and you're trying to save their lives. Okay, here's the deal. In 2 weeks, the gloves are off. We will not only tell Israel that there will be no sanctions, no anything from any international body or any country. We will encourage them to wipe Gaza off the map and start fresh with some new concrete and new ownership. 2 weeks. These people don't care. And I'm tired of hearing the bemoaning of like, I can't believe they're killing Gazans from those same people that won't do a damn thing to help them. It's why I'm so disgusted at the United States in World War II during the Holocaust, not taking Jews. And
So are we supposed to go take them after we just paid for the bombs that were blowing them all up? That sounds smart.
other countries not doing it. I'm like, what are we doing? You were saying this was happening and at the same time not taking any refugees in. Like this is ridiculous to me.
But wouldn't the same criticism be levied from them to the United States and say, well, then why don't you just take them?
We have taken some. We're doing everything that
I know,
we
but why
can.
not take them all? You have this massive land.
And you paid for the fucking bombs that blew them up.
The richest nation in the
They
world.
won't like it here.
Not their
They'll love
people.
it there.
They'll say the
they're
same thing.
used
Not
to
our
the
people.
climate there. We don't have the proper infrastructure. I mean, I would come up with whatever excuse I could.
But that would be that would be the criticism back. And the thing is that
And it's somewhat fair. I get it, but yeah.
It is fair. It's a fair criticism.
Yeah.
The thing is like, as far as a geopolitical thing goes, though, I don't see, again, how this actually makes Jews safe. When I look at the history of Israel, right, I don't actually see how the state made Jews globally safer than if I envision a world where this nation was not established as a state, right? Would there be the same kinds of even blowback on the West from various Muslims who use it as a crux of, you guys worship the Zionists, so we have to attack you too?
Yeah.
It would change a lot of things across the board. And so I'm not actually sure that it lived up to this promise, which I guess is the crux of what we're talking about.
Well, that's a
what
good
it's
question.
not, what we're not saying here. For any of you who might get upset because we're having a real conversation, right?
Jerks.
What neither of us are saying is that sovereign nations aren't allowed to set the policies that they wish,
They very much
or
are.
that you're not allowed to set up your immigration policy how you see fit, that you're not allowed to protect your land how you see fit. Neither of us are saying that. All we're pointing out and arguing kind of in the nuance here is if we envisioned a world where Israel itself never established as a nation, right? What would the distinction in society look like today? And the reason you introduce those hypotheticals is because you can then use those to kind of launch forward and project what a future looks like, and also project on whether or not this whole experiment there was actually a great idea to begin with. You know, and I think that those are important conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if bad theology led us to that, that's something we should definitely address. And if bad theology is leading us astray right this second, and I would contend, as Ted Cruz rightly points out, that it is, right?
He didn't mean to point that out, but he did.
His own, right? He points it out very well. Then I think that it's something that's worth looking at. And this was just a ball, by the way, Gerald. I really enjoyed the back and forth here, and I feel like we got a lot of that out on the table. So agree with me or disagree with me. Neither one of us are advocating for negative consequences or negative outcomes for Jewish people. We're kind of just taking a narrow vision on theology and what its effects are in the world.
Absolutely. And I think if you had to ask either one of us, we are actually praying for the salvation of all who are apart from Christ.
Yes,
we want all who, exactly, it doesn't matter who it is, Arabs, Jews, Palestinians, Israelis. We want everybody to come to faith in Christ. And so there are a lot of issues that we need to dive deeper in like this, Andrew. Maybe we should do this a little bit more often and kind of talk about some of these things.
Please
because
don't.
I think it would.
Please don't do that anymore. I apologize. This was not a debate like I was sold on. I did not watch this in advance because I'm lazy. I was told this was a debate, and it was not. It was a friendly conversation. And also, I apologize for my lack of interruptions. It's like the feature of my show, and this was just awful. This was a wet fart, and I apologize. I will do more work to get you better stuff to react to. That was painful. Painful. But I will be back here, hopefully. I'm going to try and come back maybe this weekend if my air condition gets fixed. Also, I apologize for the fan noise. That's not a normal thing, but my air condition's out and I'm in New Orleans, so it is hot. So I will be back Monday for sure. Maybe if I get the air condition fixed this weekend, I might do a content quest just so I can talk to y'all for a bit, get some people in here. But thank you, and I will see you Monday for sure. So peace.
Did I burst you off?